In the small town of Blackwood, nestled deep within dense forests, stood the Eclipse Mall. Built in the late 1980s, it began to decline by the early 2000s. Stores closed one after another, visitors became scarce, and soon all that remained of its former glory were dusty display windows and the flickering of neon signs that were long overdue for replacement. Yet, even in this state, Eclipse Mall continued to operate, as if refusing to give up. It seemed as though the building itself was alive. It breathed, living a quiet, unnoticed life full of secrets. Locals avoided it, whispering about strange incidents that had occurred there in recent years, disappearances, eerie sounds echoing from empty hallways, and shadows that moved on their own. Officially, these were dismissed as vandalism or the overactive imaginations of impressionable townsfolk. On a summer evening in 2023, a group of friends decided to explore Eclipse Mall. There were 4 of them: Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Michael. They had heard the stories about the mall, but treated them as urban legends. The group wanted to film a video for their YouTube channel, which focused on abandoned places. When they arrived at the building, the sun was already setting, painting the sky in blood-red hues. The mall looked even more sinister than they had expected. Its facade was cracked, and the massive glass doors leading inside seemed on the verge of collapsing. "All right, ready?" Jake asked, turning on the camera. "Let's just get this over with," Emily replied, trying to sound confident, though a cold fear gripped her inside. They stepped inside. The air was heavy and damp, as if the building was breathing on them. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing peeling walls, broken floor tiles, and empty stands where mannequins once stood. "It's like time just stopped here," Sarah whispered, glancing around. They moved deeper, filming every corner, every detail. But the further they went, the stronger the feeling grew that someone or something was watching them. At times, they thought they heard footsteps, but when they turned around, no one was there. "Guys, do you hear that?" Michael asked, stopping abruptly. "What?" Emily frowned. "Whispering." They listened. Indeed, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper drifted from the darkness. It was so soft it could have been mistaken for the wind, but there was no wind inside the building. "Let's get out of here," Sarah said, her voice trembling. But Jake, always the risk-taker, insisted on continuing. "We're already here. We can't just leave. Let's see what it is." They followed the sound, which grew louder with each step. The whisper turned into muttering, then into something more. Words they couldn't quite make out, but that sounded like an incantation. Finally, they reached a vast hall that had once been the food court. In the center stood a figure. It looked like a person, but its movements were unnatural, as if its body didn't belong to it. It stood with its back to them, muttering something. "Hey, are you okay?" Jake called out, but the figure didn't respond. Suddenly, it turned around sharply. Their flashlights illuminated its face, and they screamed. It wasn't a face. It was a mask of flesh, distorted and stretched, as if someone had tried to reshape it, but failed. The eyes were empty, and the mouth was twisted into a horrifying grin. "You shouldn't have come here," the creature rasped, its voice like the grinding of metal. They bolted, but the corridors they had just walked through now seemed like a maze. The walls shifted, the floor trembled beneath their feet, and laughter, low, menacing, and insane, echoed from the darkness. "We can't get out," Sarah screamed, but her voice was lost in the echoes. They ran until they reached a large hall with escalators, leading down into complete darkness. Emily stopped, gasping for air. "We have to go down," Jake said, though his voice wavered. "No, it's a trap," Emily shouted, but it was too late. Shadows emerged from the darkness. They resembled people, but their forms were distorted, as if their bodies had been turned inside out. They moved slowly but relentlessly, surrounding the friends. "We didn't mean to disturb you," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You already have," one of the shadows replied, its voice echoing as if from the depths of hell. They tried to run, but the shadows grabbed them. Their screams mingled with laughter that filled the entire space. The next day, the police found a camera lying at the entrance to Eclipse Mall. The footage showed only a few minutes. The friends entering the building, their laughter, and then silence. There was no trace of them. The mall was closed forever, but locals say that sometimes at night screams can be heard coming from within, and those who dare to get too close see silhouettes in the windows. 4 figures standing and staring into the darkness, as if waiting for someone to come and save them. But no one will come. Eclipse Mall never lets its guests go. I won't tell you my name. If you recognize my voice from old videos, please keep it to yourself. I don't want to receive any more messages. I don't want to hear new theories. I just need to tell this story. And then I'm done with social media. In 2017, I was a YouTuber, not a superstar, but I had decent views, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions. If you've ever watched 24 Hours in challenges, urban exploration videos, or clips of me sneaking into restricted buildings, you might have seen my content. But it was all fake. That's what I need you to believe. That's what I want you to believe. I was always careful. I planned every video like a heist, scouted locations, found entry points, mapped escape routes. But in May of 2017, I got cocky. I wanted more. I wanted something that would blow up the internet. 24 hours in an abandoned mall sounded perfect. I found Elmwood Mall, closed in 2013, still in decent shape. No security, just a few cameras that hadn't worked in years. I brought everything I needed: a flashlight, a night vision camera, food, a power bank. I was ready, or so I thought. I slipped in through a service door. Inside, it looked exactly how I wanted it to. Dusty tile floors, shattered glass ceilings, dead silence. I started filming right away, building up the atmosphere, and then I saw them. Mannequins. Not just a few. Hundreds. Left behind in long-looted stores, naked, broken, posed in unnatural positions. Some missing arms or legs, others covered in graffiti. Some stood in groups, as if they were talking. I joked on camera, something like, "Now, this is a real mannequin challenge." I even moved a couple, posing them in even stranger positions for the next shots. I shouldn't have touched them. By 2 a.m., I was set up in the food court. The air smelled of stale grease and mold. I was filming a menu board where the lights were still on when I heard footsteps. Not the echo of my own, someone else's. I turned off my flashlight. Silence. Then, a faint plastic creak. I slowly turned the camera toward the sound, carefully increasing the brightness. The mannequins had moved. Not by much, just a few centimeters. But I knew where they'd been earlier. I checked the footage. 3 hours ago, one by the escalator had its arms at its sides. Now, one arm was stretched forward. I laughed nervously, told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd bumped it. Maybe I'd remembered wrong. I kept filming. At 3:15, the camera shut off. The battery was full. It couldn't have died. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight. The mannequins were closer. The one by the escalator was now on the first step. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember running. 1 second I was sitting. The next, I was across the food court, gasping like I'd run a mile. I wasn't alone. Something moved in the corner of my vision. A head turned. Plastic crashed to the floor. I bolted, didn't look back, didn't turn off my phone. Ran until I was outside, gulping air. The camera never turned back on, but my phone caught everything. I never uploaded that video. The next day, when I checked the files, they were all corrupted, every single one. All that remained was a single frame, a blurry image of the food court. I'm sitting on the floor, and behind me, something. A mannequin, no head, no arms, just standing there. I never went back. I quit filming. The channel died. Maybe that's for the best. I don't care if you believe me or not. Just don't look for Elmwood Mall. They don't like being watched. This happened at the Silver Mall, a shopping center on the outskirts of the city. My friend and I decided to spend the evening watching a new horror movie that had just been released. The cinema was located on the 3rd floor, and as we rode the escalator up, I noticed that the entire mall seemed deserted. Despite it being early evening, there wasn't a soul around. Only the occasional lights from the shops flickered in the empty hallways, creating an eerie atmosphere. When we approached the ticket counter, the cashier, a pale girl in her 20s with a hollow gaze, informed us that the screening was almost empty. "Only one seat is taken," she said, as she handed us our tickets. We didn't think much of it, figuring it was even better. Fewer people, more space. The theater we entered was massive, with a high ceiling and rows of plush seats. The lights were already dimmed, and trailers were playing on the screen. We noticed that the only other person in the room was a woman sitting in the middle of a row. We made our way to our seats, closer to the screen, and that's when I saw him. In the very back row in the corner sat a man. He was wearing a dark coat, and his face was hidden in shadow. At first, I didn't think much of it, but after a few seconds, a strange feeling crept over me. We had bought tickets for 2 seats, and the only occupied seat belonged to that woman. Who was this man? Why was he here? I tried to push the uneasy thoughts away. Maybe he was a staff member or someone who had bought a last-minute ticket. But something inside me tightened with anxiety. I walked to my seat, bent down to lower the chair and place my jacket, and when I looked up again, the man was gone. He had simply vanished, as if he had never been there. I glanced at my friend, but she didn't seem to notice anything. "Did you see him?" I asked, but she just shrugged. We decided it must have been a staff member who had left through another exit. But then I remembered there was only one exit, and it was behind us. To leave, the man would have had to walk past us, but we hadn't seen or heard anything. The movie started, but I couldn't focus. Every shadow on the screen, every sound in the theater made me flinch. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling as though someone was watching me. My friend noticed my unease and suggested we leave, but I was frozen in place, as if hypnotized. By the end of the movie, I was on the verge of panic. When the lights came on, I turned around and saw that the woman who had been sitting in the middle of the row was also gone. My friend and I hurried toward the exit, but as we passed the last row, I noticed something on the floor. It was a photograph. I picked it up and froze. It was the man I had seen. He was standing in the corner of the theater, his face twisted in a grimace of horror, and his eyes were empty, like those of a corpse. We ran out of the theater, but the hallway held another surprise. The entire mall was empty. No cashiers, no security guards, no shoppers, just flickering lights and silence, broken only by our heavy breathing. We rushed to the escalator, but it wasn't working. We had to take the stairs, and with every step, I felt like someone was following us. When we finally burst outside, I turned around and saw him. The man was standing at the entrance of the mall, his dark figure silhouetted against the bright street lights. He was staring at us, and I felt an icy chill run through my bones. Months have passed since then, but I still can't shake that feeling. Every night, I dream of that theater, that man, and his empty eyes. And yesterday, I received a letter. Inside the envelope was nothing but that same photograph. On the back, it said, "You're next."